Hey everybody, it's Jordan Arell here again with my daily video about circumcision, and today I want to talk about why I call circumcision circumcision. Because a lot of people would rather call circumcision either genital cutting or genital mutilation. And to be honest, my actual favorite term for circumcision is partial amputation or non-consensual partial amputation of the penis, which is what it is. In a very exact, descriptive way, you're amputating, or even you can get more specific and say around half the skin of the penis or most of the nerves of the penis from a non-consensual minor without anesthetic, often. So that would be a very detailed description. Unfortunately, it's very wordy, and so takes a while to get out. And the reason that I don't use the other two terms, genital cutting or genital mutilation, is, for one, I think genital cutting is actually not harsh enough and not really accurate from my experience and many men's. I think genital cutting, some activists like to use because it's very descriptive and they say neutral. I would actually say it's too far on the positive side. And not descriptive enough, again, because genital cutting, I mean, a cut isn't necessarily an amputation. So genital, or at least partial genital amputation, and non-consensual at that, genital amputation is more accurate. Genital mutilation is a good shorter version of this, and I feel that's a very accurate term for what I feel has been done to me. I've had my genitals mutilated, and the reason I don't use this term that often is for this reason, is simply that if I'm talking to someone about male genital mutilation for the first time, the second time, they don't know very much about it. For one thing, they just don't know what I'm talking about. If I come out and just say male genital mutilation, they'd say, "What's that? What are you talking about?" And so it's good to start with a term they actually know and explain it at the very least. But furthermore, I think using circumcision until you've explained why it's harmful, and then once you get far enough along to the point where they start seeing those connections themselves, maybe, or until you are at a point where it's where they're starting to get enough insight that you can start to introduce that idea that it's comparable to female genital mutilation, which is a term that they probably do know and understand most of the time. Then you can introduce that term, because they'll understand it and because they've already got an idea of why you see it as male genital mutilation. So, yeah, the main reason basically is that first, they won't understand it right away, and then second, that it can be too aggressive, and that if you come right out and say circumcision is male genital mutilation, it gets a very strong reaction, but often it's a very negative reaction, and one that makes them distrustful of you and not want to listen to you, and kind of starts an argument right off the bat, rather than coming in and explaining some of the more empirical facts or your own experience and why you take the position that you take. So another thing I like to say about it is that the reason I feel so strongly that male genital mutilation is a good term and the correct term and should always be used for people who are more familiar with it. I often fall into the habit of using circumcision because right now at this stage of activism I use it so often, because often I'm trying to start a conversation with people who haven't heard of this before, who don't know anything about it. And so I kind of default to that term, but I think at some point when we get far enough along, and certainly when you're talking with someone who knows more about it, it's perfectly fine to use the term male genital mutilation, which is accurate. Also, not just because it's a good description of what's happening, but because it's my experience of what's happening. I think that's really important to note, is that if someone says they're circumcised and that's their experience, and that's how they identify themselves, I completely respect that and I accept that for them. And I'm really happy for anyone who's happy with their circumcision. That's great. I wish I was. I really do. I really wish that everybody just could be happy with it and it could be okay and not matter, and it'd be great. But that's not the case, and that's not the case for a lot of men. A lot of men feel nth degree violated, that it's mutilation, that it's one of the worst things that can happen to you as a human being. And so that's my experience. My experience is that I am a victim of male genital mutilation, or a survivor of male genital mutilation. And that's very important, a distinction for me, that is how I experience it. And so that's how I'd like for people to refer to my experience, and for me to be able to refer to my experience. Again, I just don't do it very often because I want to be able to explain why and come at it from an angle that people will be open to hearing it. And so I usually use the term circumcision. However, in the near future, I think I will be switching to the term male genital mutilation, and using that exclusively, especially for myself, again, because that's how I experience it. If you experience it as circumcision and you're happy with it, that's great. But I think as a culture in general, we also really need to start using the term male genital mutilation, because that is how at least some babies always experience it, and some babies who will turn into men will always experience it. And we need to acknowledge that fact and recognize that, and realize that, yeah, it's great that you experience it as circumcision and that you love it. I'm very happy for you, genuinely. I mean that. But your child may not be. Your child may feel how I feel, and how many hundreds of thousands of men feel. Probably millions, probably more very soon, if not already. So many men feel that way, and we have to stop doing it to our children, because you never know who's going to feel that they've been mutilated and who's going to say, it's great, it's just circumcision. And so I think as a culture we need to switch to that term as soon as we can, as soon as it becomes able to do so, with people both understanding it and people understanding why. Once people have already kind of started to have that initial conversation, we need to switch to that term. And I think that time will happen very soon, probably 2019 or 2020. And I'm very excited for that, to be able to call my experience what it actually is, and have people recognize and understand why I feel that way. Because it's the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And it's really, really awful. And yeah. I want to be able to call my experience of this event what it really is. But until then, I will probably keep using the term circumcision, and hopefully very soon we'll see that switch happen. So thanks for listening, guys. I'll talk to you again tomorrow.